Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video. And that's right guys, you read the title and you know exactly what it is that I'm reviewing. And yeah, because I've been meaning to get around to this one show for a while. And yeah, having watched the entire show, in fact, because I did watch the first episode, but then didn't finish the rest of it until the time now came to review the show. I started from the beginning and so on. Yeah. You ever have those moments where you, watch one or two episodes of a show, then you just randomly stop, and then you get my point, but yeah. So that's right, guys. I am now finally reviewing this one show that stars none other than good old Markiplier himself, The Edge of Sleep. Yes, The Edge of Sleep. Man, I gotta tell you, this series was pretty interesting, pretty creative, and pretty good. Now, obviously, I'm aware that this started off being a podcast series, which Markiplier was involved in. Then it became an actual show, like on screen, being filmed and such, which that's pretty cool to see. And, you know, for me, it's hard to see Markiplier be an actor in something like this, you know what I'm saying, like in a show, because we've all gotten used to his quirkiness and, you know, hilarious attitude and all that stuff on his YouTube channel. I think you know what I'm saying, just yeah. But yet at the same time, Markiplier did not disappoint in this show. This podcast series that was brought to life as an actual show was pretty good. Yeah, and my memory's very fuzzy. I should say this. I genuinely, honestly can't remember, you know, how I first reacted knowing the existence of this show. Maybe I was a little bit aware that there was a podcast series. But until we had gotten a show based off of that podcast series by the same name, then yeah. I'm sure as though that when I first heard about this, I was like, ooh, Markiplier in a show? And the fact that it originally was a Amazon Prime original series, but unfortunately the license expired and such, you know, on streaming, and now with it being moved to Tubi, which, yeah, that's where I watched the rest of the show. When I did watch the first episode, that was when it was still on Prime Video. So, yeah. But, yeah, just with what The Edge of Sleep has to offer, with its storyline, all of these episodes, not being very long ones. I mean, as the show proceeds, then some of them start to get a bit longer. Like, most prominently, the sixth and final episode, it's 25 minutes. But, yeah, most of them being, say, well, 21 or 22 minutes, so, yeah. It was pretty interesting, and I don't know about you, but I feel as though that parts of the show kind of, and I say kind of, giving me, like, a bit of Twilight Zone vibes, or maybe even a little bit of, say, Stanley Kubrick. I mean, if you think about it, and if you get what I'm saying, and maybe you feel the same way too, I'm just simply saying, but yeah. I mean, mentioning those two, that would definitely be something that maybe both would have done. Something like that, you know what I mean? Just, yeah. But yeah, everything that overall, everything that The Edge of Sleep had to offer, being based off of a podcast series, and with what goes down in all 6 episodes, and, you know, as the show proceeds, and with the 6 episodes, what we learn and how, yeah, crazy, but in a good way, of course, yeah. I really enjoyed The Edge of Sleep, and now that I, finally got around to watching the entirety of the show, and golly, because, you know, the fact that, again, these episodes are not that long, you know, still. Okay, so, with the first things I've had to say about The Edge of the Sleep out of the way, now, as always, for me, read the description / the story. Following a night watchman who finishes his shift at work to discover that everyone in the world who went to sleep the previous night has died. Okay, so all 6 episodes, Episode 1, the title of the episodes, Episode 1, The Whale, Episode 2, The Elephant, Episode 3, The Black Triangle, Episode 4, The Dream People, Episode 5, The Nightmare, and Episode 6, The Dream Warrior. Yeah, so with Episode 1, The Whale, description / the story, Dave and Mateo, I think I'm saying his name right, rushed to the hospital after making a chilling discovery at an old friend's house party. Yeah, because, you know, we start off with a pretty interesting start where we see Dave being played by Markiplier himself. We see, like, so many random things happening, and then yet we see him wake up after having fallen off the back of his chair during security guard duties, the night shift, and, his friend and co-worker, Mateo, being played by Franz Drame, if I got his last name right, again, you know me sometimes. And I've seen him before. He's a pretty good actor. I know I've seen him in other materials, but yeah. Noticed that his co-working buddy Dave, because he had dozed off, then he, tipped over, and so on. And then he would recommend to Dave about going to a friend's party. Dave is not interested and, worries that they could get fired if they leave their night shift. But, Mateo assuring him that nobody's going to watch the security footage, and that's pointing at them, where the cameras are pointing on them. And Mateo does mention about Dave's ex-girlfriend, whom we did see at the start of this episode, where we see Dave on this plane, and a creepy girl, which being Dave's ex-girlfriend, is there. So again, telling Dave that his girlfriend will be there, his ex-girlfriend, and he's now interested in going. Maybe he can hopefully patch things up with his ex-girlfriend. I mean, we don't know at first why and what's going on and such. But, yeah, eventually when they make their way to the party, well, his ex-girlfriend is not there, and the party's half dead. There's not much fun going on. And now Dave immediately regrets having come. And then things get out of hand when trivia stuff is brought up, and with the mentioning of Dave's ex-girlfriend and Mateo sticking up for Dave and stuff like that. However, one of their friends, whom supposedly had passed out, Ricky, because, man, he hit his face on glass, and he's not responding, and there's no pulse. And some other people around the house, they have no pulse either. Then it would lead to Dave and Mateo taking 3 bodies, including the one being Ricky, to a hospital. However, the hospital being very busy, and even when, 2 nurses step out, one of them being Linda Russo, being played by Eve Harlow. Now, Eve Harlow, another pretty good actress. I've seen her before in other materials, but yeah. So, her and her nurse, buddy, they examined the bodies that were in the back of a trunk, and, well, because there's really nothing much that they can do. So, yeah. In fact, it is recommended that the police should be called up and such, but, yeah, not to Dave and Mateo's liking. And, and also because Eve Harlow, because I've seen her, I'm just pulling this up, okay, so she had been in a few episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and she was in that show, The 100, if anybody had seen that before. Oh, yes, and she was also in Star Trek Discovery. Right, okay. Cool. Okay, but yeah, just thought I'd point that out. And also in NCIS Los Angeles. Cool. Anyway, so, and also, Brittany Woods, that being the other nurse, being played by Marcy T. House. Well, so much happening in the hospital, and with so many people being very ill, and they have no idea what's going on. In fact, there's a moment where one of the doctors at the hospital, named Dr. Jack Gordon, being played by Danny Dworkis, if I got his last name right, again, you know me sometimes, he has to call it a day because he has to go and see if any of his family and relatives are okay and such, because with so much happening and nobody is responding to any calls. So, yeah, that's a very biggie right there. And it just gets out of hand when, there's a moment where, Brittany, she went to take a nap, but she never woke up, and Linda noticing this, and two other people out in the waiting room, they fell asleep, and a few others, and yeah, nobody, and they've all died mysteriously. What the heck's going on? Just, yeah. And things just getting really suspicious. And even when, yeah, like, say, we get to, episode 2, which being the elephant. Yeah. The elephant's description / the story. Linda and Mateo attempt to make an emergency broadcast. Dave splits to save Katie before it's too late. So basically, to put it this, where, you know, at one point Linda thinks that maybe there's a new virus that has spread and causing people to die in their sleep. But I think it's obvious that maybe that's not the case. Yeah. If anybody, like me, would immediately figure that out, you know. But yeah, and because nobody has responded, no pulse, no phone calls responded back, and so on, well, by this point, it's just the three of them, Dave, Mateo, and Linda. And yeah, and as I read in the description / the story, because what they have to do next is, you know, they disembark the hospital for now, and, you know, at one point they see if anybody is alive. And even when, say, Linda whips out a gun to shoot in the air, if anybody's going to come out, and when they hear that gun bullet. But no. Nobody has come out. And this would lead to Dave being worried about his ex-girlfriend, Katie, that, yeah, he's not going to let her go to sleep. Yeah, because if she does, then she's done for. And Katie, by the way, Katie, whom we see in a few times at first in some flashbacks and so on. Yeah, and more about the flashbacks and dreams that Dave has had. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But yeah, Katie, being played by the talented Leo Tipton. Yeah, I've seen her in a bunch of other materials. Like, most prominently, I had seen her in The Big Bang Theory. Yeah, where she appeared in 2 episodes. And she's done more than that, of course, but she's a pretty good actress. And I remember seeing this on YouTube where, you know, because, oh, Markiplier kissed a girl on the show. He kissed Leo Tipton. Oh no, Amy's gonna be jealous. Yeah, so I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Okay, obviously, you know, Amy knows her man is acting, so... And isn't it obvious? Even I'm on the same page as you guys. Yeah, because definitely Markiplier and Amy, they're in a relationship, so, yeah. You know something? Because now that I bring up Amy, because... don't you think that it would have been pretty cool if some of Markiplier's buddies, including his girl, Amy, and his buddies from, you know, say those from Syndigo, Bob and Wade, Jacksepticeye, do you think it would have been nice if they would have been involved in the show? Maybe as a cameo spot or something. I mean, I know that they weren't involved in the podcast series, but I'm just saying, because it would have been pretty cool. But... you know, I understand. I'm just saying, it's just a simple thought, you know. And, yeah, and for Amy, because obviously the same would go for her if she had a cameo spot. But it's hard to tell, but I'm just simply saying, just a simple thought, you know, and what if. But, okay. Anyways, maybe you guys would think so, too. Like, yeah, that would have been pretty cool. Okay. So, yeah, so Dave, at one point, like, he tried to call up his ex to warn her, but... you know, for Katie, because she's been wanting to take some space and such, and, well, eventually he did manage to get in contact with her, trying to warn her not to go to sleep, but Katie thinking that that party she went to was trying to get them back together, etc., but yeah, that's not the case, and just, yeah. Then, it leads to Dave having to dash his way to Katie's place on foot. And it's like, you know, 4 miles and all that jazz that Mateo says, but no, Dave, he's gonna do it. You know, run on foot, I should say, because, yeah, this is very, very serious to him, and that really shows how much, in this show, Dave, he cares about Katie. So that's what he does. And seeing all the other victims, their bodies, you know, lifeless, and after they had gone to sleep, even one whom, you know, is on a swinging chair, and the sprinklers did hit his face. Just thought I'd point that out. So, yeah, and also, yeah, Mateo and Linda, they do proceed on to a radio station, And yeah, because the radio station being hosted by Late Night Larry, it's his radio show, and Late Night Larry being played by Clay S.T. Thomas. So when they arrive at the radio station, they can immediately see that Late Night Larry is dead after having fallen asleep, and thus, making the emergency broadcast, Linda especially, warning everybody, anybody who is still awake and alive, if they're listening to this radio broadcast, then yeah, they can't go to sleep. And even when Dave showed up trying to warn Katie about this, yeah, then they hear this on the radio, and Katie realizing that, yeah, this is serious. Yeah, and pardon my French, but it's true. The entire world, and the four of them, they're in deep shit. Just, yeah. So, yeah, now Katie knows, and now tags along with them. And, yeah, and eventually, things would patch up between Katie and Dave, but yeah, until I talk more about that. Okay, so yeah, with what episode 2 had to offer, and episode 1, forgot to mention, yeah, a great start. And with episode 3, The Black Triangle, description / the story, the crew returns to the hospital in search of survivors. With time ticking, Linda makes a drastic decision to uncover the source of the epidemic, resulting in a shocking discovery. So, when they all arrive back at the hospital, well, and here's another thing, because series of dreams and flashbacks we get through Dave. Yeah, because, the flashbacks, they serve to reveal the protagonist Dave's traumatic past and the mysterious origins of the elephant monster. Did I almost forget to mention that? The elephant monster? Yeah. Jeez, some of the visuals, even the practical makeup and such in this, well, pretty top-notch, especially the appearance of the elephant monster. Jeez Louise. If you see what that elephant monster looks like, holy cow, man, that's impressive makeup. All right. So the Elephant Man and the global epidemic. So yeah, with the scenes showing his involuntary self-harm during hallucinations, his difficult relationship with his ex-girlfriend Katie, and the scientific interest in his long-life sleep disorder. Yeah. And these flashbacks, because they incentel, if I said that right, context for the present-day horror and confusion, and illustrating the deep psychologic and physical impact of his condition, yeah, and hinting that it's a potential connection to the unfolding disaster, yeah. So, and yeah, because with the traumatic past, because, yeah, Dave's childhood, his childhood struggles with sleep and a mysterious elephant monster that haunted his dreams. And these early experiences suggested a pattern of trauma, potentially linked to his current condition. And, in fact, because Dave's mother took him to see a special doctor, and the doctor had a special sleep chamber, maybe that could help out Dave's situation. And by the way, because young Dave being played by young Connor Kendall, and also Dave's mother, Tracy Torres. That's the name of his family, the Torres family. So Tracy being played by Lisa Doropt, I think, yeah, I said that right. And the doctor that Dave sees in order to get some help with his condition and with the nightmares he's having, Dr. Louis Castaneda, I think, if I said the last name right, being played by Carlo Rota. So, yeah, with the procedure of this sleep chamber and with what Dave experiences, well, not much help for poor young Dave. In fact, with what he sees in his dreams, it would actually at one point lead to an accidental moment where young Dave stabbed the doctor right at the neck. Jeez. And I don't know about you, but I don't know, because I don't think I would view as, Tracy or Dr. Lewis as bad people or something. That especially goes to Dr. Lewis, because, because they really had no idea what was really happening to young Dave. So, yeah, the reason I bring that up, because it just hit me, if you ever have those moments, but, yeah. And yeah, and it makes you wonder, because I would presume that Tracy, Dave's mom, must have passed away sometime later, and I don't think, no, the show doesn't establish that, and even if the podcast series did, but, yeah. And also, there was a moment that, yeah, when Dave started to grow up years later, the nightmares stopped. But apparently, at some point, they just hit back in him. In fact, there was a moment, and what would lead to Katie having split with Dave is that at one point she woke up seeing Dave having sleepwalk, and he was in the bathroom. He cut himself on his chest, a triangle symbol, and something about that triangle symbol that we would learn later on, and even by this episode. But yeah, so with the third episode, the Black Triangle, because again, they all make their way back to the hospital, and turns out that there's one person in the hospital that is still alive, and the fact that she was diagnosed with cancer, and that being Ruth Nelson. I almost said Wilson. Ruth Nelson being played by Patty Allen, and Katie knows Ruth, because if I recall, a friend of the family's or something, So Ruth is the only one that's still alive, and because that she was diagnosed with cancer, and the more they try to figure this out, and in fact, they take a volunteer, like a body, to examine and to find some clues. In fact, when they're examining the body, they have to cut open the top of this guy's head. Well, it's discovered that the lifeless body is still warm. I mean, obviously, with lifeless bodies, they would be cold and such, but not in the case of this body. Linda discovering this specifically, like, the top of his head is really extremely hot. In fact, steam coming out when they open what's inside of the head and such. And when they discover, a triangle symbol that, it's a callback for Dave when he was sleepwalking, he cut himself, and so on. But, that's really interesting and, disturbing. Like I said, the practical effects and makeup just really top-notch in this show, because with the clues, trying to solve answers and clues, and even when it turns out that there is no virus that's the cause of people dying in their sleep, that turns out not to be the case. But overall, because nothing on the body that they examined and such. In fact, there's a moment where Dave needs to process this, Katie checking up on him, and Dave explaining to her the whole thing of what happened to him as a child, and, and even when, Katie, at first, she thought it was all complete bullshit, and, the guilt just consuming her and such, and just, now realizing that this is all true and just feeling bad, And there was a moment where Linda, she had to change Ruth's pills, and Ruth wondering why her family hasn't called back. And then we would see Linda taking Ruth to examine her and so on, and where it would lead to Ruth dying. And Mateo noticing this and informs Dave and Katie, and they think that Linda's going crazy, like risking Ruth's life and such. However, we would find out later, and when she would explain that Ruth actually volunteered to do this, when she would die in her sleep, then Linda would examine her brain and stuff like that to get more answers, and with what's happening and with what she's dreaming and such, and saying that, she died in her dream, and Mateo just finding this hard to believe, and and that would lead to, then it would lead into the fourth episode, the Dream People and such. But and I'll go ahead and read the description / the story on the Dream People. As Dave's hallucinations get worse, he makes a risky decision and try to get some answers. Because he volunteers to sleep for about 2 to 3 minutes, because he died numerous times while asleep in his dreams, but managed to still be alive. And only 2 or 3 minutes is all that Dave is gonna have in order to proceed with this. And with what, and also, episode 3, The Black Triangle, was pretty good too. Okay, all 6 episodes were fantastic, Alright, so, with the the dreams that happen because, yeah, well, because with what he discovers, in these dreams, and to get more answers. Well, to best put it at this, yeah, the encounter with the elephant monster, the Beast, yeah, and as Dave's dream walking ability develops, yeah, he learns about the primary antagonist, the elephant monster, also known as the Beast. This entity that kills people in their sleep and takes on a different form for each individual. And communicating with the whale, the guide, yeah, because Dave encounters another dream entity, the whale, which, yeah, because that's what we did see at the start of the show, because this whale flying in the sky, and eventually, like, there was a moment where the whale died and, you know, crashed and such. But yeah, so Dave encounters another dream entity, the whale, which guides and protects humanity from the Beast, and the whale directs Dave and the others toward a safe haven. In fact, during that dream that Dave was having, because he did have an encounter with his mom. In fact, Dave, he was chained up by the leg and such, and, well, when his mom showed up, offered him a drink of water, but in the glass cup, noticing the triangle with an eye, and the eye with the triangle symbol, and yeah, and then, well, it turns out not to be Dave's mother, of course, in the dream, because the Elephant Man in disguise, and the Elephant Monster, I should say. I'm sure some of you would probably refer to him as the Elephant Man in this, but yeah. Anyways, and then, like, say, there's a, you know, hooded figure, you know, whom interacts with Dave, and whom we've been seeing multiple times, sometimes in his dreams, named Safet, being played by Louis Javar, and he's a part of this group called the Dream People. And to put it this, because, yeah, Dave would learn from Safet and so on, with what he saw in his dream, that, yeah, to get to a safe haven and so on. And that, of course, being on this uncharted island, which being called Aristera. Yeah. So when Dave, he then would wake up from the dream he had, and then telling them about that they have to go to this island called Aristera, yeah, to follow the whale's guidance. Yeah, I mean, they're not really sure about this at first, like primarily Mateo. However, Katie supports this and sticks up for Dave. Then Linda would then start to, you know, go along with this, and so would Mateo. In fact, they have to fly their way to that island, and luckily, Mateo, he does know how to fly, but he only learned how to fly once, you know, flying school and such. But overall, that's what they plan to do. So, thus, they plan to drive their way to a local airport, and even when, like, say, they have to this time take an ambulance, in order to get there, because Mateo's red car then broke down. It did break down a couple of times, but then, yeah, it then was done for. So luckily, you know, the keys are in the ambulance vehicle, so thus they're going to take the ambulance to the airport. But, however, there does come a moment where Katie, she's starting to fall asleep and such, and also the fact that all of these episodes, they end off with, say, 41 to 46 hours without sleep and such. Nice detail. Yeah, because that's how long our main group of characters have gone without a wink of sleep. And they can't. Just, yeah. And it would lead to a very certain point where, man, because their brains can't process, and things start to become blurry and all of that. Yeah, I mean, obviously something like that would happen in reality. And by the way, because I've been meaning to mention about this, these pills called Modafinil, maybe I mispronounced it, but you know what I'm talking about. You've seen the show. And not to mention that there's this cartoon character, you know, for these commercials, but these type of pills, yeah, being a high dosage, stimulated drug derived from the real drug modafinil that is used to keep people awake by preventing them from falling into a deeper sleep. And yeah, it's a real world stimulated. Modafinil helps people with certain sleep disorders to stay awake during the day, but it doesn't cure them and must be taken continuously to be affected. Yeah, and in the show's universe, high doses of this are dangerous and could lead to death. So, yeah. So, yeah, and the fact that, Katie, she did take some sleeping pills and such early on in the show, but yeah, at a certain point, she then starts to fall asleep and such, but, from Linda and Dave, between each of them, just trying their best to keep Katie, awake and such, even when, they have to, inject a needle and such, and which does work, but eventually, and when they make their way to the airport, and they hop on the plane, and with the last 2 episodes, which, yeah, The Nightmare and The Dream Warrior, and I'll go ahead and read the description / the stories. For The Nightmare, Dave must convince Mateo, Linda, and Katie to make a dangerous flight to Mysterious Island, as I said. And for episode 6, The Dream Warrior, after a treacherous crash landing, the crew struggles to stay awake as they face extreme hallucinations. Yeah, so, right as episode 5 ends, well, when they're on the plane, Katie then starts to fall asleep again, and this time, there's no response, where they're unable to wake her up and such, and by that point, and I almost had a good feeling this would happen, she dies. Yeah. Poor Dave, and man, Markiplier at his finest, where, man, he lets out a gut-wrenching scream, and, it's a bit quiet, and we quickly cut to the clouds and such, just, yeah, really good. Yeah, and you could see just the pain in Dave's face after all they went through, yet it seemed as though they were starting to rekindle. Katie, she dumped him by mistake, and all that just, yeah. Never fails in that kind of certain stuff, Yeah. But with the 6th and final episode, it's interesting how it opens, because with the entire, cast members and this show had a lot of executive producers, just to point that out. And it's obvious that Markiplier was an executive producer. Yep. And yeah, because we see that they're still on the plane, making their way to the mysterious island, and again, which being called, the Aristera. Yeah, Aristera. And, because, there's a moment with, say, Mateo where, he's trying to keep it together. He's trying to keep himself awake, and, even when he has to bite himself, he left a couple of marks and so on. In fact, what would happen to Dave, he would start to hallucinate, where he would see Mateo not at the wheel of the plane, but he's technically still there, and he would hallucinate seeing himself right next to him, just, yeah. And eventually, and after 2 hours passed, because, that's how long it took them to get to the island, 2 hours left, when they finally make their way to, finding the island of Asteria, there's no runway, but it would lead to Mateo having to hit the water, which that's what happens. Luckily, they managed to survive, but they did have some visions and dreams, but they managed to still be alive after the plane hit the ocean. And, because with them finding the island, because, following the whale's guidance, Dave, Linda, and Mateo make their way to a small, protected island called Asteria, and where a community of other survivors have gathered. Because I think it's obvious that those that have survived the curse of, and that's what it is, it's obvious, it's a curse. Surviving that curse with people dying in their sleep, those making their way to this mysterious island. And because, what would happen next is, because as they would proceed their way through, the jungles of this island, then would come this hallucinatory funeral. Because after Katie sadly died, the group, who now have made their way to the island, they experience a shared hallucination of an elephant, which of course being the elephant monster, of course, duh. Being one of the beast's forms. So, the beast going by different forms. Okay, but point being is that, And there's a funeral being held for Katie, and Dave confronts the creature and manages to close Katie's casket and waking the group because, Dave telling them that they have to proceed on, the main antagonist is trying to get to them, but with all of them hallucinating, they can't help it with each other, even Dave, and jeez, because they start to bleed from their eyes. God. And the elephant monster trying to trick Dave into luring him, pretending to be Katie, but it's not Katie, and he would realize that even when Katie's eyes start to glow. Yeah, so he does finally close the casket, for now, defeating the elephant monster. Yeah. And eventually they would make their way to, this village that's on the mysterious island. Yeah, and the guidance from the dream world, because, with the help of Safet, whom Dave had been seeing in his dreams and turned out to be a real person, a dream person who guides them from the dream world, Dave, Linda, and Mateo make it to the shore and are found by a new group of survivors. Yes, so, one elder who found them, and took them in and such, because, and to name some of the other characters, because we also have Vadim being played by Zenid Memizevic, if I said that right, and a couple of people, who were, say, at the party in the first episode. Like, we have Gus being played by Brandon Overwater, and Connor being played by Trezzo Mayoro, and there was also Bong Guy being played by Evan Puch, and, Velid being played by Greg Stewart. Okay, so with them being discovered and they're in a safe place. Yep. Well, because and we're the survivors. They're taken to that. Linda, Mateo, and Dave. They're taken to a small village, and many people of different intellects were also called in a dream. They were all called by the dream people to come to this island. And Savet would reveal that the whales are real and guide people like Dave to Aristera to prepare for a coming war against the beast. Yeah. And even Dave, he thought at one point that this was all a dream, but nope, this is real as it gets. Everything just happened, and sadly, with the loss of Katie especially. And the shocking cliffhanger, because what would happen is Dave, Linda, and Mateo would finally be able to rest peacefully on the island. However, in a shocking twist, everyone who has died in the nightmare, including Katie, wakes up around the world with red triangles glowing in their eyes. And this reveals the beast's army of the dead and sets the stage for a potential second season. Technically Dave did defeat the elephant monster, but not fully. No, that was just a minor defeat and such, managing to snap out of it and to escape from all the hallucinations caused by the elephant monster. But what a heck of a way to end off the show. At least we know, of course, that they get some good sleep, and who knows what their future has in store and being on that island. But for what we know, of course, is that, the elephant monster hasn't been defeated altogether, and thus everyone who died in their sleep being resurrected, and even Katie, because, she went down with the plane and her body's okay, but even seeing Ruth, still in the hospital, everybody else that was in the hospital, everyone just, it's crazy. Because, just imagine how hard that would be for Dave, because, seeing Katie return like that. But what a heck of a way to end off the first season of The Edge of the Sleep, right? Everything about The Edge of the Sleep, from beginning to end, with all 6 episodes, was pretty interesting. Each of the storylines, what goes on with our 4 main characters, the other supporting characters that we get, and from the Dream People, the Elephant Monster, some pretty good visual effects, and with the practical makeup and such, the intensity, the climax, and with the twists and everything that we start to learn about these, dreams and people dying in their sleep because of these dreams and, discovering this mysterious island and so on. And that the Dream People, they're a good colony and such, and yeah, they are trying to take down the bad dreams and which being caused by the elephant monster. Yeah. With Markiplier being the main star, all the cast members, the music and score, the songs that were in this show, everything about The Edge of Sleep was pretty good. Yeah. And I'm giving the first season of The Edge of Sleep, yeah, why not? 8 out of 10 stars. Yes, 8 out of 10 stars for season 1 of The Edge of Sleep. And what about you guys? What did you think of The Edge of Sleep itself? Any of you that first knew and listened to the podcast series, and then eventually when we would get an actual show of The Edge of Sleep, seeing Markiplier on screen as his main character, everybody else being involved in the show, which were some of your favorite episodes, and, if you enjoyed the entirety of the show, were being amazed, I should say, of what the show itself had to offer from beginning to end, and yeah, moments where you were on the edge of your seat and just, oh my gosh, just overall, what did you think of The Edge of Sleep itself, the first season, and by listening to the podcast series as well, and with what I've had to say, my review, and what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, guys, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Season 1 of The Edge of Sleep. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. Take care, and until Season 2... But, hey, we of course have the podcast series and the fact that there is a Season 2. Peace out. And now, it's time to get some sleep.